Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Doug Everett, and I'm on the steering committee here at Jefferson Unitarian Church, Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans. I'd like to welcome you here today. We're going to pretty much just turn this over to Shentat and the panel in a minute. Do want to recognize the other members of my steering committee, Mick Michelone, Mary Cowley, John Roche, and Gene Decker. And also say thanks to Joy Phelan for making cups happen here at JUC. And I'm just going to turn over, I think, to Shentat after asking you to do one thing: silence your noise-making devices. And let you know that we have a meetup group where we have our meetings publicized in our calendar. There are little purple slips out there in the hallway. If you'd like to pick up one and join us, we'd love to have you. So, one other thing? Oh yeah, we do have childcare. And we would like to have donations, if possible, to help alleviate that expense for us. We have a basket out by the door. We no longer have a budget for the child care, so we're doing that as free will donation, and would appreciate any donations you can make to that. So welcome, and thank you for being here this afternoon. This microphone up here will be available for audience questions later in the program.
Okay, I'd like to start today with a prayer. So if you could just breathe with me, a nice deep breath in and out. Holy Mother, in whom we live, move, and have our being, from you all things emerge, and unto you all things return. Open our hearts this blessed day, touch our bodies and our minds, walk with us through the gates of power, in shadow and in starlight, in fire meeting earth, in wind on the ocean, and the sweet kiss of life. Blessed be our journey. And welcome all of you to the second JUC Cups / Covenant of the Witches Roundtable Panel discussion, on the role of clergy to our neo-pagan culture. I sent out an email blast a little bit earlier, and I wanted to get that to all of you who attend today, that we polled last time to find out what the what the best frequency for these panel discussions would be, and it came back pretty mixed. However, we wound up with a mean, and we're going to go with that mean. And that is that we'll meet about every 2 months. And we're going to switch between weekend and weekday. So this will be our weekend, and then next time will be a weekday, and then next time will be a weekend, and then next time will be a weekday. So it's just going to switch back and forth between evening and afternoon. And we already have 3 of those scheduled. If you need the schedule for the panel discussions, please come and talk to me afterwards, and I will point you to the website that has it posted. Also, if you want biographical information on any of our panelists, please also come to me and give me your email address after the discussion, and I will email to you the URL. It's just a link, and you can click it when you get your email to the document, the Google document that contains all of their biographical information. So today what we'll be doing is we'll just be walking up the panel with a very brief introduction, your name, and then what tradition you've been, you represent today, and then how long you've been in some form of neo-pagan community or leadership role, right? And I will start with myself. And then when we get, of course, to Joy at the end, then just go ahead and hand off to me again. I have a few more things, and then we'll start our discussion. Okay. So my name is Shentat, and I have been running Covenant teaching in eclectic American witchcraft for 10 years now with my wife.
I'm Michelle. I've been running Colorado Springs Witches Meetup Group, which is an eclectic meetup down in the Springs. I've been also running a coven that's pretty eclectic with an emphasis on Celtic and Wicca.
I'm Joy Burton, and I run Living Earth. I'm eclectic, Wiccan with a reclaiming streak. and I've been doing this about 20 years.
I'm Gray Hart, and I run Coven of the Noetic Mysteries, and I've been doing various things around the community in a leadership role for about 23 years now.
I'm Kat Lindgren. I'm a eclectic, Native American and Wiccan, eclectic. And I've been involved in pagan leadership since 1971 and different branches of training, since then. So.
I'm Rena Chesso. I've been in the craft for almost 30 years now and been teaching aspects of that for about 15. For the last 20, also practicing shamanism and have a teaching and healing pursuit in that area as well. And I think that's the role I'm in today. Yeah.
Magni Thorson. I've been a Norse heathen for 37 years. I've been a Gothi of the Mjolnir kindred for the past 13 as far as leadership in the community goes.
I'm Joy Phelan with Front Range Pagan Pride. I've been a practicing pagan for, I think, 17 or 18 years now, and in sort of a leadership role for probably about the past 5.
Thank you all very much, panelists, for coming tonight. I really honor your service to community, your service to spirit, by joining us today and sharing your very differing perspectives. It's nice to see such diversity, and I hope that we can continue with such diversity for all of you who come to these talks. Speaking of, that moves us into the next kind of thing to talk about, and that is that beyond this discussion, we're going to be shrinking the panel a little bit. Last time we overshot our time mark, and out of the 10 questions that we had slated to actually discuss, I think we got through 2. Hence some of the make it short shortcuts that I've implemented with the biomaterial, etc. However, we're going to trim it down a little bit even more from that, and we're going to limit the panel to 6 leaders in community. And what I would like to do is put out a general call right now for leaders who want to step forward and speak. So if you have been an organizer and a leader in any neo-pagan or pagan tradition in community, please talk to me afterwards. And let's try and get your information so that we can slate you for future discussions, which are going to move on to other topics that are important for us in Colorado when it comes to the growth and needs of the neo-pagan and pagan communities. Does that make sense? Woohoo! I'm on track. Yay! And I'm coherent and lucid, and that's amazing. So, all right. The rules of the road for the roundtable panel, as all of you should know, since I think all except for Greatheart have sat on the panel, is that we have 3 minutes talk time per question. Today we have 4 questions to cover, since we've slated some of the questions for a future panel discussion that deals specifically with community outreach and I think activism, is that right? Social action. Social action, very good. Exactly. So for those of you who have studied the questions and made your notes, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be targeting from your current list 1, 3, 4, and 5. So we're going to begin with question 1. We're going to dive right in, and the way this will go is we'll just, each panelist has 3 minutes to speak. Try and stay within your time. If you are exceeding 3 minutes, I will go ahead and raise my hand, and that will be an indication that you should speed it up and wrap it up. We should be able to get through these in enough time for you as an audience to come up and ask specific questions of any of the panelists or all of the panelists, and then we can have free-form discussion. Okay. So, change my eyeballs. Our first question for our panelists, neo-pagan culture once grew through private correspondence between a general reading public and those publicized apologists and popularizers who happened to take students. Or it grew through word of mouth referral between existing neo-pagan practitioners and their immediate social relations. This latter model is still in place and operating, as it does with my own coven, but more and more leaders are establishing themselves in our religions by hosting, sponsoring, or organizing medium to large, often outdoor, public celebrations of our religion's holidays. Are these workers serving our religions? Are they driving our fastest means of growth? And should they not also be considered clergy? Panelists?
Well, if nobody else has taken it, I will.
Very good.
All right, fine. I'll be the first one to speak out. First of all, I believe that they do serve a purpose. The problem I run into, and I've talked to many people about this, is that a lot of times if you go to an open ritual, and I mean completely open, there doesn't tend to be a whole lot of the energy, a lot of the things that we look for and crave from ritual doesn't tend to be at these open rituals. Certainly not like they were 15, 20 years ago. Are they clergy? Yes, sure. As long as they are not just simply doing a ritual and calling it, that's it, we're done. If they're willing to stick around and answer questions, a lot of people come to these rituals, especially the open ones, because they have questions. They've read a couple of books, or they've talked to people they know, or friends of friends, and they have all these questions about what is it that I'm discovering. And their big problem is they don't seem to be able to find anyone who can answer these questions. So in order to be clergy, I think you need to stick out and stick around after the ritual and be there before the ritual to talk to people who you don't know, the new faces in the crowd, and say, is there anything you're curious about? Is there any questions I can answer?
I'd like to respond to that, Greyheart. I agree with you that at our open circles, we really need to make sure that there's that additional component of connecting with people and providing that one-on-one relationship and welcoming people into the community and answering their questions. I would disagree with you that all of the open rituals are somehow less meaningful or important. I haven't seen you at any of our Living Earth open full moons.
You're right, and I do want to make one thing clear. The one ritual I saw from here was at Beltania last year, and it was fantastic. It was the old style ritual. I have no problems with your rituals.
Well, and I'm sure it's not a complaint, but I see what you're saying about sometimes when you have a huge mass of people and everyone is anonymous, there's not that sense of connection.
Absolutely.
So I think that the solution is to really bring us together in connection and make connecting with each other our first priority, and then we can connect to spirit together greater. But back to the question, with neo-pagan culture being conveyed on an individual basis in a private fashion the way that it used to be, just because something has always been done that way, I don't think that makes it the right way to do it. And I, for one, looked for a private coven, looked for a teacher for years, and it never happened. And every time I looked for a private coven and a private teacher, I ended up starting a group and leading a public group, and somehow it just became public and open and what I've realized is that that's the role that Goddess has for me.
Funny how that works, isn't it?
It's just happened. And I think that it only benefits our culture to have multiple avenues to reach that knowledge and to build that community. So I really think our religion is growing, not because we have these open circles and not because we're out there proselytizing, but because we have something to offer and people are drawn to it. So I really feel like what I'm doing as a leader of an open circle is clergy, and almost even more of a clergy. When you look at what the traditional definition of clergy is, when you look at what Christian and other ministers do, I feel like I'm doing more of those things in terms of community outreach and connecting with others, and I'm doing the baby naming ceremonies and the hand fastings and if someone needs assistance, I'm the one that people come to. So I feel like I'm filling more of the traditional clergy role than someone who maybe is just taking on a correspondence student and doing initiations. So I think that to say that people who are doing the open circles may somehow be less of a clergy, I would say the opposite is true, in my experience.
I would like to add on to that. I searched for a very long time for a teacher, and actually am still searching, just because I personally crave the one-on-one teaching. But I have found that it's very hard to find them, and that when you're in the open public, that you're able to draw from so many. Like, I've learned so much from the people that I've met throughout the meetups, just from the different perspectives to different sides of theology that I just never even would have thought of. I think is an amazing gift that I have been able to receive. I think that as clergy goes, I would have to agree with Joy that I feel that that when you're out in the public, that you almost have to fall into the default role of being clergy, because people are coming up to you that are on day one of their path, that are asking the questions, and somebody has to answer them. And if you're standing up there saying hi, it kind of defaults to you to have to answer those questions. I think that sometimes that's because you're out there and you're seen, you have more ability to do that than from, I know some certain people that they have amazing amounts of knowledge to give, but they're too afraid to step out of the broom closet. And that knowledge gets lost because it never gets passed on. And I think that is probably the hardest thing that we're dealing with at this point, is that if we can have an actual clergy that can step up and be able to give that information instead of getting it lost, then our traditions will be able to continue on.
Okay, my views are a little bit different. My tradition, unlike most of everybody that's in this room, is very structured. You don't just decide one day you're going to become a Godi. Because as a leader in the community, we have responsibilities for the safety of others as well as ourselves. The one thing that I have to deal with on a regular basis is these groups that start up and all they promote is hate-mongering, racial purity, Nazi crap. And that does more damage. So I disagree on that part of saying, are these people that are out there in the face clergy? No, they're not. And anyone that decides that they want to try to become a leader in the community and that is what they're promoting should be taken outside and done away with, because we don't need any more of that in our world. As I said earlier, I've been on my path for 37 years. It started when I was called to by Thor at 10, and I've worked very hard to become what I am today. I was sworn in by the Allshare Godi from Iceland, and whom I took my oath to, so he ordained me. And I run into, on a regular basis, people that say, well, yeah, but my Godi, he doesn't teach us this, or he doesn't teach us, you have a Godi, and why don't I know about this? Because I've been in Colorado now for almost 17 years. And I take that as an insult for someone to just decide that that's what they are. I understand from the side of witches that they, especially with Morning Glory, they owned the bookstore, that said, she would see people coming on one day, buy a book on witchcraft, and then the next week they had a coven. Mm-hmm. And, to me, that's like giving a bunch of 3-year-olds napalm and a triggering device. They don't really know what they're doing, and they're going to go out there and they're really going to cause more harm to the community than they are good, because they're spreading information that they don't fully understand. So, and the rituals that I perform, whether it's for 2 people or there's 100 people at our gatherings, the energy is going to be there because our people are there to honor our gods and our ancestors. We're not there to justify your presence at our gathering. We don't care. You want to come and take part of that? It's fantastic. But it doesn't matter who shows up. Our circles are open. And I get a lot of crap from other kinfolk and folk across the United States because I let Christians into my circle. Because I value people that hold true to the words of their deity instead of what mankind has done to that. So the Christians that I let into my circle, I would gladly lay my life down for. So, sorry.
I think that open circles absolutely are a benefit. I'm a little biased toward JUC Cuups, but I think that's one of the things that they do really, really well. They provide an open space that's open to the public in a traditionally safe environment. People can go to a church and know that it's a public place. They're not going to somebody's house that posted an ad on a bulletin board, for example. I mean, that's a little freaky to me. I wouldn't go to some stranger's house, but to have an open circle in a public place provides a level of safety and comfort for the seeker to know that they're going to a public place, that they can leave if they get the wiggies and not going to be scared. And so I think that the people and the groups that are offering open public ritual are doing a huge benefit for the seeker, because there has to be somewhere. You can read a book and you can learn something, a lot of somethings from a book, but we are a mystery religion. There are some things you can't get from a book, and you need a safe place to go and experience some of our religion and our practices and our energy and all of those things. And as for are those people clergy? Who am I to decide if your deity has made you clergy? That's not my place. If you feel your deity has made you clergy, so be it. More power to you. And so I think the people that are willing to gather up their courage and, performing public rituals a little scary. I've done it. A lot of you in here have done it. And it can be a little frightening and a little intimidating and lots of energy. And so absolutely those people are clergy, and they're providing a benefit, not just to people that are already on this path, but people that are just figuring out if this is even their path.
I think I would disagree a little bit here with some of the terminology. Part of what we're describing, I don't know if I would call clergy so much as officiant. And I do think there's a difference. Clergy, to me, implies an ongoing relationship with the people that you're officiating to. An officiant might be a guest, might never see those folks again, might be there as part of their own training in performing public ritual, and that is a great offering. It doesn't mean that the service they're providing is any less meaningful, but does it have the continuity beyond that event? Because the terminology here does get a little dicey. People can decide they're clergy, well, that's great, but I've met a number of people who have decided that they're shamans and are only too happy to tell me that they're shamans. But if I ask them how that came about, well, they had a dream, they did this, that, or the other. They took a class in Peru. That's popular lately. In terms of what do they actually do as a practice, and is this any title that they have been granted as respect from their community? Well, no, they don't have a community. They don't know anybody else doing this. They don't have any interaction with anyone else. And that's kind of like declaring yourself the village wise woman. It's one thing if your neighbors decide that that's what they want to call you. It's another thing if you take that on for yourself. So some of these are words that I think are best given by others to a person in a role. Other ones, if I decide I want to go back and be a Methodist again, I can decide I'm a Methodist again. I don't decide I'm a Methodist clergy, but I could opt to be a Methodist just by opting to make that decision, I think. Not likely, but I could decide to be a vegetarian and not be eating meat. So, there's some decisions that we can take that title on pretty readily. I think one of the gaps that we've got here is that there is such a resurgence or awakening of interest in this path. Coming out of earlier traditions, there are a number of people that had training from years back where everything was done one-on-one. People were pretty much under the radar. There weren't large public groups, places. Everything was kind of so in the closet. We're kind of in between two styles of leadership and teaching, one that's very private and fairly almost secretive still, and another which is much more out in the open and perhaps not as well prepared, but people can find us. So, where do we come down on that? I mean, some of the people that probably are the best teachers in this community, I don't know who they are. I'm another one of those people that searched and searched for teachers, and I'd hear rumors, and I couldn't find them. And I know that thing of, when you're meant to find the teacher will be there, yeah. Well, there's people clamoring for teachers. And,
Rena,
sometimes you have to make it known.
Are you wrapped up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rena, I would love to jump on that too and talk a bit about it from my perspective. And I would tend to really agree strongly with you about several parts of what you would say. I think about a relationship to spirit, and there is, in my mind, a firm difference as well between a practitioner and clergy. And as a practitioner, all I have to do is use the technologies of enlightenment that are wrapped up in a given religion to be able to claim that as my birthright. Whereas clergy demands a relationship to a community that requires service of them. Anar, who is the standing Grand Master of the fairy tradition, described the relationship as, in her book, White Wand, by saying that a witch's source of power is her, H-I-R, community. And I would agree with that, and I think that's what informs the title clergy. That I have not only my core of daily practice, which makes me a practitioner, but I also guide and lead others through some kind of spiritual inheritance so that they can develop that practice as well in the world, connecting in what I would consider, and what we've formally called traditions within my tradition, so that you can connect to spirit in this particular way and lead you towards clergy, and which we, of course, teach has 4 roles. There's personal daily practice, there's which is service to ourselves and the gods, and then there's service, again, to our community of faith, our fellow believers, and then community to the larger world, or service to the larger world or larger community, and then service to history and time and the gods by leaving some kind of permanent mark here of spirit. Yeah.
Yes. Gosh, we were on the same page tonight, this afternoon. In the traditions that I was trained in, you are trained, and a title, whatever that is bestowed upon you by the community or your teacher. It is not something that, oftentimes we are called to that place so that we are in the right place at the right time. But it's spirit that calls us to that place. And we follow our path, it unfolds for us. We don't choose it, it chooses us. And then we step upon our path and do our work. I feel that there is a need for both open ritual and for a separate identification of clergy for that which clergy does. And that is because of what goes into the responsibility of clergy as opposed to officiant. You cannot be in the broom closet, even though in the past many people were very secretive about it, because that's what had to happen. It had to be that way, or you wouldn't survive. But I do not feel in this day, once you step on the path of clergy and are recognized as clergy, that you can stay in a broom closet. You are called upon to be able to be out in the world and be of the world and to help unite the world and others who need guidance from you, who want to learn more, direct them to where they need to be. So anyway, that's what I have to say about that.
And I think is that everyone?
I think so.
That's everyone.
I think there's so much more that all of us could go with.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah, but we've got other questions to
We
get
have,
to
we
today.
have other questions to get to today, so we're going to go with those. In regard to clergy as oracle, I recall the days, 1 billion years ago, right, when only in coven could I go before the goddess, drawn down on a priestess. Now, just last year, my own coven hosted a drawing down for Osiris for the general public at Beltania. Drew about over 100 people. And I typically draw down for the multiple drawing down at Dragonfest, about 500 people, where anyone who happens to be at an event can go before divinity regardless their religious views. One of our roles as clergies is communication with the gods on behalf of our community, knowing that our venues, like the multiple drawing down, the future of this mystery, core mystery of our faith, and how are we passing on the messages of the gods to others.
I can start off with this. I really thought about this question a lot, and the best answer I could come up with is I really don't know the answer to this question. I felt called to serve as a vessel at Dragonfest for probably about the last 3 years. I'm not sure if I'll do it again. It's whether or not the goddess calls me to do it. That idea of only in coven and only a trained priestess can draw down, there's a certain elitism about that I'm not sure I really agree with. But then again, I simply don't have that coven experience to draw from. I don't really know what the old days were like. All I know is what my own experience, and I have to be true to myself as an individual, and that's all I have to share with others. So,
I would piggyback off of that. Dragonfest 2 years ago, my first time going, was the first time I had ever experienced a drawing down. Before going, I had heard the phrase, kind of understood part of the concept, but had no clue what it was really truly all about. It opened my eyes to what this religion and this path can lead me to. I can't say that outside of the major public that I would be able to find it elsewhere. I don't have a high priestess that knows how to do it. I don't have someone that can teach me how to hone that skill in for myself. I've done it once, not knowing, don't know how to do it again. And I think that somehow if we're not going to have the secretiveness of the communities and the little small sections of covens being able to pass down that information, how else do we get the next generation to know how powerful and moving? It was a life-changing event for me to be able to experience that. And I'm not really sure how else, at this point in time, how our community is growing, how else we would be able to show that, since it's really hard to find the elders and the experienced people when you're first looking.
Okay. That's a mixed bag of tricks. Oftentimes people come because they think they know what they want to learn, but they're not, but they don't. And so I think on some element of that, it has a tendency to burn out those of us who teach. I've had people come to me and say they don't know what the drawing down is, and yet they do. They've met somebody who's done a drawing down but doesn't really understand the elements of it, what it entails, what it's really about. Each of us, from a shamanic standpoint, each of us can be a vessel at any given time. But we really need to understand ourselves. We need to understand a process to be able to be honest about what that is, that full experience of what that is. It is not reading someone. It is not telling them the future. It is not wigging it. It really is emptying yourself to become a vessel, to allow yourself to be filled. it is a very shamanic process. And many times people come to that without a full understanding of what that is. They don't even have a full understanding of who they are coming into that. It would be good to actually sit down and take those that were heart of their hearts interested in learning this and willing to invest the energy and the time in developing that skill within themselves to better be able to serve the community as that and to teach others. Maybe a good place, finding those that are interested in learning that would be a good place to start with that. So, I don't know. I have very mixed feelings about that. And that's what I have to say.
I think we are on the same way.
Yes.
I also had my first experience attending a drawing down at Dragon Fest some years back, and it was life-altering. It was life-changing, absolutely. Transporting. I personally was not finding my way to anything anywhere near that through my regular practice in the craft when I started studying and pursuing shamanism and shamanic journeying. That all shifted. And a term that I've been using more recently for shamanic journeying is direct revelation, divine revelation. It's direct. You're talking with an aspect of deity in the process of journeying. And when that's applied to something like giving voice on behalf of that for others, doing healing work, things like that, it's not you doing it. You're the vessel, you're the, I'd say jumper cables. But the point is to get out of your own way and let that come through. And I think if I had come to that earlier in life, I'd probably be in an asylum at this point, because at the end of that session, you need to be able to come back to you. And if you're at a point in your life, whether you're going through turmoil or you're just young and kind of unformed, it's harder to get back to that place securely where you come home to yourself. And but it is an opening up, and I don't know that I've ever heard it too clearly explained in any of the craft discussions that I've had, whereas this seems very readily taught within a shamanic tradition, and it is accessible to everyone. So it's just a different approach, perhaps.
Okay, so me not being or knowing this, drawing down, if that's where you kind of step outside of yourself and let the divine take you, okay, yeah, that's happened on many occasions, and it's usually only with Thor, because he's the one that chose me when I was a kid. And when he comes and has something to say to the folk that are gathered at our circle, it's the only way to describe it, and it sounds hokey as all get out, is I'm just kind of sitting up on a shelf or on a tree branch just watching what's going on. And I see him, and I can, sometimes I get the residue of what has been said. When someone comes in our folk and they ask to be dedicated to Thor, is usually when he decides to come down and just see how stern they are, because he's not a gentle God. He's when he speaks loudly, because that's all he knows. So when he has something to say to me, I usually wake up with a migraine, or I feel one coming on until I can get outside of my circumstance and go into meditation and hear what he has to say clearly, or go to bed at night and sleep, and then he talks to me. So that I've seen. Unfortunately, when we were talking earlier about the public rituals not having any magic or seeing anything, that's always been my experience. Whenever I've been invited to go to a public ritual, you need to come down and see this, great. And I stand there and I kind of wait to see what's going to happen. And I don't see anything, and I don't feel anything, and I wonder. And I know I've got several friends in this community that I know they are exactly what they say they are, and I've seen power within them, so I know it exists. But for my own benefit, yeah, It does, like you say, it changes you when the first time that happens and you don't know what has gone on until afterwards. That kind of gives you a higher sense of purpose. You're like, you're right, I got to be on top of my game from now on, because if I start falling, they're going to come in and take over, and I don't want to be lost, you know. And traveling, shamanic, in the Norse and the shamanism, that's very similar, because I travel all the time, and I've started teaching people in my kindred, or in the kindred, I'm sorry, the way to do that. And it does. You can get out there, and if you don't have your solid anchor, you can go and not come back, because that's a much better place to be than here, you know, at times. So that's, yeah.
I have to say that, you know, personally, in an energetically space, me personally, I kind of have a hard time connecting. I don't see pictures. I just know things. I can't tell you how I know it. I just do. And I trust that. But I've been lucky enough, one of my first teachers very clearly explained what drawing down was. It wasn't ever something confusing or a mystery. And so when I was first able to experience it, when I attended a ritual, I've attended it several times, it was moving, life-changing, got messages that I must have been ready to hear. Otherwise, I don't think they come through as easily. And so I think it's a benefit, you know, if you're at a point where you're ready to hear and you don't feel that you can access it yourself. Like for me, attending a drawing down is very powerful, because sometimes I feel like I don't get the message myself. But if I attend, you know, to someone who's drawing down God or goddess and has a message for me, I'm able and I'm ready to get that. And that's very powerful and very much something that is a service to our community. But it's one of those things, you've got to be ready for it and ready to hear what they're saying to you.
You know, that's exactly my thought. When I first started along this path, it was understood. If you are on this path, you're going to be a priest or a priestess. That's the whole point. We've gotten to this point where anybody can buy a book, and we've got a huge explosion of people who are wanting to be involved, but they don't want to be clergy. They just want to be a part of something. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But what it does set up is that we have a large population of people who either don't know, don't realize, or don't want to talk to deity themselves. I talk to the gods every day. I don't have to draw down to talk to my gods. You know, 2 nights after the last panel discussion, there are 2 of us here who drew down for an open ritual, for an open full moon. Mm-hmm. Now, the 4 people who drew down, myself included, I know all 4 of these people know what they're doing, have done it before, understand what this is, and the point was to help bring to a larger group of people an understanding, as well as giving them answers that they may be seeking. When it was done in a coven background, everybody who attended understood, because for weeks or maybe even months earlier, you'd be talking about, here's what we're going to do and here's why we're going to do it. This is what it's about. This is why we want to do this. When you go to a place like Dragonfest or any other open ritual where they're doing drawings down, it's not necessarily explained to the people who are attending. Here's what's going on and why we're doing it, and here's the purpose. So I don't think the question so much is this the future of drawing down, so much is, yes, it's going to happen, but what are we as priests and priestesses who are running these types of rituals going to do in order to prepare the people who are coming to visit and talk to the deities as far as what to expect and what is expected of them. You know, when I hear of a person at Dragonfest going up before the goddess wearing a T-shirt that's a beer advertisement saying, "So, what do you got for me?" That's not what it's about. It's about, I have a question. I think I might know an answer, but I'm not sure if it's the right one. Can you help me? That's what a drawing down is for. And if that's not what you're going for, if you're not going to get answers to specific questions, it may not be the answer you want, and it may not be the answer to the question you thought it would be. But you have to be going for specific answers. And as long as you understand that, as long as the people who are attending the drawing down understand this, then the form makes no difference, public or private.
Shinshat, I'd like to say something about that. And I've noticed, in open ritual, of course, we have people that come that don't have any history or any knowledge or a background in. There are people that do come that are practitioners, are very involved, and sometimes attend them because that's something that they want to do. But we also have people that come from other backgrounds that are not familiar with this process, and there isn't an educational process brought forth to help them with that. I'm also seeing things in Grand Coven that I find acutely disturbing because once upon a time it was initiate level only that was admitted, and as time goes on we're finding people showing up that have very little knowledge of the process. So I think some education needs to be happening somewhere along the line that's getting missed. And maybe when we have open full moons, where there is going to be a drawing down, maybe a brief, review about what that's about to be more helpful to people who are interested in finding out more about this practice.
I think that's definitely the key. I found that last Dragon Fest, Joseph actually did a workshop in the morning before they did the drawing down that evening. And I learned such an amazing wealth of knowledge. And then to be able to apply my knowledge in the evening and to be able to see the people that I know personally and have seen them at the festival and how they act, and then to be able to see them in the drawing down persona, it really made all the connections. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, is to really be able to have a class or a workshop where people can go to learn about it.
I'd like to jump in with another comment on that. I agree with that to a large extent. I've been at that workshop. I've taken part on both sides of it as audience and participant. The people that most need to be there aren't there.
That's the problem.
Generally.
It's underattended.
Generally.
And just as I would say there's a difference between an officiant and a clergy member, I think there's a real difference in attendance people in terms of, are they there as participants or are they there as audience? If people are really stepping in with some spirit of their own and fully taking part in creating the energy of that circle, you get completely different results
Absolutely.
than if they're standing kind of like, well, I was just curious, I don't want to really be involved, I'm just here to kind of be a looky-loo. I don't think that's really mostly what we want. Is that even a place for those people to be in ritual, or is some kind of open class, panel discussion, question and answer format more appropriate to them? I didn't realize what you just mentioned about Grand Coven, but I thought that was meant to be initiate level.
Yes.
I didn't think that had changed.
I didn't think
but
so
oops.
either, but yeah,
So,
it seems to have.
And they still say you should be at initiate level, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
I don't
I'm
know.
gonna have to step
All right.
in and. So, thank you, Rena, and thank you all of my panelists. I had no clue that this would be such an important topic, and obviously demands more discussion. So, what I would like to do, if everyone is interested, and I'll just ask for a show of hands, to ask if the mystery of drawing down shouldn't be itself a panel discussion for a future event.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, very good. Then I'll go ahead and add that to the list. That's excellent. I wanted to chime in briefly, since we went a bit over on that subject, with some of my own thoughts about this. Being on both sides of the fence and understanding all of the concerns that this panel has raised concerning drawing down, that it is a deep mystery not only of our religion, but also an incredibly misunderstood one about all of the sub-communities underneath neo-paganism. And though becoming a vessel of some kind, and I want to completely honor Magni's experience with this as well, is, I think, a commonality of our understood experience of the divine. As far as the role of clergy with being an oracle and sharing that as a service to community, I feel that I've been incredibly honored with being able to take that role, and believe very strongly, may the gods preserve the craft and may the craft preserve the gods, and this is one of the ways that we do that, is through becoming vessels. But also am very aware of the fact that, not everyone is meant to become a vessel. And there are roles for clergy that are outside of that particular role. Though I think once it was expected in witchcraft training that we would all eventually take this role. So I'm still kind of formulating some ideas about that. Yeah. I would like to move on to the next question, however. We have 2 remaining questions. So many of our clergy, after years of leadership in community and working a day job, burn out and drop out. I've also noticed that a new class of full-time clergy is emerging, those who publish, travel, teach, and or who organize very large events and who get paid for their time and energy as leaders in community. What are each of your thoughts on this, and what does this say about our religious views on money?
Well, isn't that a mixed bag of tricks? Personally, I think energy is energy is energy. And I think it's really a shame that people like Isaac Bonwitz has to struggle to survive and live. Elders that have given a lot to community don't have money to pay their bills, yet they've shared freely with the community and they've taught. And now, as they've aged or they're getting older and things come up in their life, they struggle to survive. I think that, this is really a mixed bag, because on one hand, you can do things so self-promoting that there is no spirituality left in it. And we know that. And that's always a danger. And that's the danger in this. On the other hand, it is nice to have some kind of energy come back that will sustain your life. In some traditions, elders are respected to a level that they are supported. Things are paid for them in a way so that they don't have to suffer. And if they're coming to attend an event, that is paid for so they don't have to suffer to get there. And they don't get paid a lot of money. They get paid a little tiny bit, just enough to make ends meet. And that's good, because they give of themselves and they give of themselves for service. So it is really, it's kind of a mixed bag of tricks, because what is the motivation and what is the drive behind that sharing of information? Is it to become rich and wealthy, or is it because you realize that that's your path and you need to share that information? And is it okay to have something come back to you as an equal exchange of energy? So
Yeah, I fought with that for a long time. My grandfather taught me that knowledge is meant to be shared. Mm-hmm. So for years and years and years, I've been willing to tell, if you want to know about the runes, I'd sit down and teach you about it. It didn't matter to me who you were or whatever. Then one of my friends said, you should probably look into seeing about maybe charging for your class, because everybody else does. And I fought with that again. He goes, well, let's put it into simpler terms. He said, if we were living in 835 and you were the village's Gothi, in order for them to get knowledge from you, they would have brought you a bull or a couple of goats or something that would have helped you live. If you take that in today's standards, well, you know, if this gentleman here wants to know how to use the rooms, I'm sure he's not going to show up at my house with 2 goats, but he could come up with $100, and I can go out, therefore, and buy the food that I would use in exchange for that. And I've seen a lot of this stuff, and I've done 2 classes that I've actually charged for. And I was kind of shocked that people actually responded en masse like they did. Because I've seen people that'll advertise a room class for an hour, and it's $50, and they're going to teach you in that hour invocation, evocation, divination, how to craft your own set of runes. They're going to tell you everything that you need to know about them. And I can't get that. So I said, okay, how do I want to break this down? Okay, so I'll teach a 4-hour class. I'll charge you $60 for it, and when you attend that, you're going to get a book that I've started putting together with my experiences and a set of runes that the folk have made themselves. And both classes that I've taught, I've had about 10 attendees. And so a 4-hour, and had them sit there and tell me that they really appreciated it and that they felt that I was undercharging for it. So to me, that's kind of interesting. As far as being paid, you know, if I could stop my traditional 9-to-5, well, not 9-to-5 job, and just become a spiritual teacher, I would definitely try to make a living off of that, because I think it's needed. So, you know.
I hear what you're saying. You know, I think a lot of us have been turned off by the embezzlement and excesses and the money grabbing that we've seen in certain aspects of mainstream religion, and that's one of the things that has brought us to alternative paths, such as for myself, Wicca. And so we interpret dollars as being a sign, you know, dollars for prayers is a big scam. And then you see some of these new age classes, you can have a weekend intensive with someone who can channel the spirit of, you know, whatever for only $20,000 for the weekend. And we're so turned off by that. But we also need to get over that, because our community has needs that we need people to step up and fill on a full-time basis. And we can't do that unless we can make a living and feed ourselves and have a roof over our heads. So we've got to get past that. And what got me past that was I helped teach a class with Reclaiming Spirit. And that was the first time I ever taught anything where a fee was charged. And I felt very uncomfortable with that at the beginning. But what I saw through that is that some people who were scholarshiped, who were allowed to take the class for free, those people didn't even show up. Mm-hmm. The people who paid were the ones who actually valued it, because it was that exchange of energy.
Investment.
It was a sign. It was a token. You know, when I first started Living Earth, which at the time was HRPM, Highlands Ranch Pagan Meetup, I felt that it was my ethical duty to not only provide the religious experience, but to also, you know, be the one to pay the most, to contribute the most financially as well as spiritually and in time. And that's what leads you to burnout. You know, if you're the one who's planning the event, reserving the room, and paying for the room, and baking the cookies, and then everyone else who shows up expects you to thank them for them giving you the opportunity to do all that work, and, you know, people come and eat the cookies and go home and haven't even chipped in $1, it ends up, it's still very rewarding personally, but that does lead to burnout. And my solution, I came up with a pretty creative solution, I think, was to start Beltania, to be what now funds Living Earth. I don't have to be the financial, supporter of Living Earth. People are contributing through donations at the rituals, and also Beltania is now a funding source for that, where now I don't really have to worry, am I going to be able to pay for the space rental? I'm also fortunate enough to be a stay-at-home mom, so I have a little bit of the extra time to donate to that. Like you guys have said, I would like to be able to do this full-time because it's needed. I feel called to do that. But we need to find more creative ways to make this sustainable for those of us who feel called to do this full-time, to be able to do it because it's needed.
Wow, I thought my point of view was going to be the unpopular one, but apparently not. some of you probably know I've been running a website past couple of years, and it's probably going to shut down in a couple of months because I can't afford the hosting fees to keep it up another year. I get emails on a constant basis telling me what a great place it is and how much people have learned from it, and it's great, but nobody's willing to support it. And so it all comes out of my pocket. Well, that wouldn't be a problem if I was making money. I'm not looking to become rich. I'm not looking to become wealthy. I share what I share freely because that was the way I was taught. You pass on the knowledge to the next generation. The problem is, I think a lot of the people who are coming in for the knowledge aren't necessarily coming in to learn the knowledge for the same reasons we did. I think it's simply to say, I'm a witch, or otherwise. I give all this information free of charge. I try and make a little bit of money on the side by creating products that I think are useful, that a person who is serious about their religion will find of use. I think the biggest problem we face as far as paid clergy or a community-supported clergy is this poor pagan myth. Mm-hmm. I had it just today with another member of the panel. She's saying, I'm a poor pagan. Where did we get that? The Franciscans. When did we become Christian? As Magni said, if it had been 1,000 years ago and someone wanted you to do something for them, they would have brought you a cow, a goat, something, some form of payment. It would have been expected. I'm not looking for a cow or a goat. I'll take it. I'm sure I've got friends who can butcher it for me. And I'll be willing to share some of the meat for the job they did in butchering. I'm simply looking for a fair exchange, whether it be energy, money, whatever. I do believe that if I am doing a service of value to you, then reciprocation is correct.
Bring in the goat.
Bring on.
It is definitely a very, very hard thing for a lot of us to be able to stand up there and say, I need donations. I need help paying the $70 every 6 months. Mm-hmm. I think for me, I have always come from the background that knowledge is abundant and should be shared freely. I feel called to be a leader and want to focus my entire life on it. And that's what I want to do. I want to be able to provide that service. I can't figure out how to do it without going to work every day. How do I pay for my house? How do I get my dog food without some other way? And I was talking to my sister about it, and we grew up Catholic. So, that's our background that, how did the priest survive? He got a very, very, very small stipend from the Catholic Church, and then the community gave him the rest of it. We paid to put the new roof on the church. We paid to make sure that he had food. We invited him to people's houses for Thanksgiving and Christmas so that he can have the dinner, so that it's all provided for him. That I know that a lot of us come from different faiths that are very structured, and it's why we ran away from it. But I think it's one of the things that's really, truly lacking is that we have no support for our clergy, and it's something that somehow we have to figure out in a different way, that it doesn't have to be the same way as Catholicism, but a way to be able to support the clergy so that we can do it full time. So that I can't just be like, okay, well, I can do it from 8 to 10 o'clock at night and from 5 to 6 in the morning, and that's the only time I can help, because otherwise I'm at work. That I think it would be an amazing thing for our community to be able to figure out how to provide that.
Well, I agree. It's funny. I was talking to my mother the other day, and she was talking about a battle that she was having with her church and the elders of her church. They had been without a pastor. This is Southern Baptist Church in smack in the middle of Arkansas. And they had been without a pastor for about a half a year. And how this young junior pastor had jumped up and just started doing what needed to be done. He started visiting people and in the hospital, and he started helping other people kind of build their porch or do the this or do the that, or so and so can't get in and out of her wheelchair and she needs help, or and he had a painting business, right? And that's how he was able to afford going and starting to do all of this. And it took that church the entire time of him, this junior pastor, doing all of this for no pay, before my mother finally sat down and said, he's already doing the job. The only question is whether you people are willing to pay him or not. And it took that. It took that act of being someone else's conscience about energy and energy flow for her church to finally say, yeah, okay, let's draw up the contract. And how much does he get for his miles, and how much does he get for this, and how much does he get for that, and do we pay his mortgage, and do we do this, and do we have the capital budget for that? And they finally drew it all up, and it wound up equitable because she had to step to bat for quite a few things. But two things have been rolling around in my head since Mom and I had that talk, and concerning this subject in general, certainly for neo-pagan clergy, and that is the energy exchange is only half of the equation, the other half of the equation being our spiritual proposition to the community and community's need for that spiritual proposition. And how much do they recognize their own need and come to us and value it enough to make an energetic exchange? A subject that I could spend probably the next couple of days with all of you in a room chatting about the various aspects of. So thank you. We will.
No,
I think.
I didn't speak.
Rena? I'm sorry, Rena. Would you chime in, please?
I am very interested in how this question was originally phrased, because it speaks of authors who are visiting and doing classes and things like that. And so from both perspectives, as an author and as someone who teaches in this community, I think it's very interesting that when a visiting author comes and is teaching workshops, people acknowledge the fact that they are apparently an expert because they're published. How else could they have been published? Ha, 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 ha. And there's a certain amount of celebrity that attracts people to those workshops, where it's almost like the outside validation of the person being published, their name is known, things like that, that somehow give them credibility that within our own communities we often don't have, but partly because we don't claim it. We don't claim it. That idea that somehow we're not worthy, there's a tradition of not charging for classes, that perpetuates that. And I know in some traditions people took vows when they were initiated that they would never charge for teaching. Mm-hmm. I wasn't one of them. But I've had this discussion, people talking about the money of spirituality, pretty nonstop for the last couple of years. The 60-person sweat lodge in Arizona is one of those key examples of, how totally can you misuse a spiritual teaching for money. Something that I read a few years ago that shifted things dramatically for me, it was in the context of someone writing for some advice about her shop. She loved having a metaphysical shop. She met great people, was able to do a lot of really good work with people. Everyone was loving the shop, but she could just barely scrape by. And the person who responded, who speaks to angels, which made me really queasy, said, well, I've spoken to my angels about this, and they tell me that you took a vow of poverty in a previous lifetime.
Grief.
No, hear me out. That has still followed you because of the degree to which you took it. And I ask you to renounce that right now and see what shifts. And the way that was written, I realized that I took a vow of poverty as a hippie, for Pete's sake. Yeah, man, I can live on a crust of bread, yeah. Well, that was still following me around, not to mention who knows what other lifetime. And I created my own ceremony for that and just said, any vows of poverty that I'm not aware of having taken in the past, I am over. I renounce you, that's it. You served your purpose in that time. That's not what I want at this point. Thank you, goodbye. And things shift.
Yeah, I think, as someone that has happily paid to attend Rena's classes, there's something to be said for the energetic exchange. And, we're supposed to be a religion of creating our own reality, moving forward, positive love, however you want to phrase it. We're not really doing it, are we? Because we're all we generally, not you specifically, living in a position where you can't pay for your meetup group, or you're having to beg for money to pay for your meetup group, or the cookies and the juice, or the ritual you're preparing. For crying out loud, this is supposed to be a religion where we create our own reality. Did we forget that? I mean, and it just constantly surprises me. We can change this. We can do something else. We can make it whatever we want it to be. And for whatever reason, we forget that again and again and again.
Here. Which segues into our last question for today. Quality or quantity? Our religious traditions mostly began as closed. Now, as we've heard many times already, even just today, you can buy a book, and it'll have just about anything you want in it, from any of the large retailers, and our readerships are growing. Has there been damage, as we once feared, to the quality of our forms of worship due to its wide-spreading acceptance by the overculture?
Not all books are created equal.
I agree.
And if you don't already know it, you won't know that when you're reading that book. Yeah, I think so.
I'll go for quality over quantity any day.
Quality over quantity.
The problem I see, and I may be alone in this, the problem I see is that there are so many books out there, and 4 different books will tell you 4 different ways to do the same thing. And it confuses people. I get questions all the time from people who are new to this saying, well, which way is right? Which way is right for you? No one goes about, or a lot of the authors nowadays don't go about that whole process of do what's right for you. I'm simply writing down the way I do it. It works for me. If it works for you, go. Great, do it. If it doesn't, find what works for you. I think it's gotten to the point where money has trumped quality in the authoring of a lot of these books. As was pointed out earlier, people have found they can make money at writing books. So they write as many books as they possibly can to put that quantity out there. So that, each book only gives them a little bit, but between the 15 or 20 or even 100 books that they've written, they make a pretty good living. It doesn't matter that they're not necessarily the quality of books that we would wish would be out there. And so, I think that a lot of this stuff that has happened over the last 10 years has diminished the quality of worship, the quality of clergy, the quality of leadership, and that it's up to us to change it.
I'd like to jump in here. Going beyond just what's out there in books, addressing the issue of paganism becoming more widespread and the information is just out there. I think there is now an attitude amongst many newcomers that paganism is really just a free-for-all. Yeah. That you can make up your own religion, just believe whatever. Yeah, believe whatever you want, and it's all okay. Make up your own religion, and no sense of discipline or commitment,
spirituality.
Yeah, it's all just I just like to go to pagan festivals and I'll just dance around the fire and I'm a pagan, so now I'm a pagan priestess too.
Hey, that'll get me laid.
That would be where it's coming from.
And I think in some ways for some people there's we're missing that dedication to really honing your craft and honing your skills and really developing that relationship with deity or following a tradition if you do want to follow a tradition. So whether you're self-taught or whether you go to take classes or join a coven or a group of any sort, I think that discipline and serious contemplation can take place, really in whatever format you want. But it doesn't always happen the way that, I guess, in the past when it was more highly regulated, more closed, and more of a tight-knit community, there was more of an insurance that happened. So I would like to see our community encourage people to really take their path to the next level, and I think eventually the people who are the party pagans, who are just sort of in it, I just want to do my own thing, I think eventually they'll kind of go off and find the next thing that's hot that day. One of the benefits, I think, of our community becoming more openly accepted and the information being out there is that it's no longer this exclusive club just for the chosen few. I really like that we're out there and accessible, and people who are curious and interested can today find any of our groups with 2 minutes of searching on the internet. And I think that's a very big plus, and I think that plus outweighs the negatives.
I think that there's definitely, it's a big toss-up some days that, like, I know when I was first starting, I went and I read pretty much every book that I could get at Barnes & Nobles. I think that I was also at the point where I could read a book and be like, okay, that chapter was a bunch of crap, and move on. I think there's a lot of people that when they're first on their path, they don't have that ability, that it's really hard when you're reading the 10 books, that why do they all tell me something different? It's the blessing of paganism that we all get to choose our own path that's a little bit different from everybody else. But it's very hard to begin with. But I also think that it's amazing that there is so much information out there, that, you know, if I want to go and learn something specifically, that I can go and there's 20 different books that I can go and learn it and truly learn it. But I think that you had the key on that. It has to be the person's dedication. And I think that's probably the part that we're really losing, that, you know, obviously, I'm part of the generation that, you know what, we grew up with the craft, we grew up with practical magic. Aren't those amazing, amazing movies that show such great qualities of what it is to become a witch? That I think there's a lot of people that jumped on the bandwagon for that, and they really never took it to the step next of, okay, now I actually have to learn that it's not just about, oh, I can cast spells and change the weather, and that's great. That I think that as a community, that we kind of have to be able to step up and guide people, that there is so much more, and to be able to step up to it.
Practical magic, yes. Charmed, not so much.
Take it, Rena.
A couple of the words that have recurred in this portion of the discussion are discipline, determination. That's important here. I mean, the party around the fire is a good party. But there's so much more to this. I don't know that that's well conveyed in books. And, you know, on behalf of us money-grubbing authors, the publishers are the ones that are making money on this. If publishers did not feel there was a huge appetite out there for books on Wicca practices, shamanic practices, they would not be publishing this stuff no matter who was writing it. What continually gets lost there is the fact that this comes back to what is your connection with deity? How does this ring true for you? Following all the formulas out of all the different books, which are often contradictory, isn't what gets it there. I think initially, at least, I'm sure many of us came to this early on through maybe some contact with friends, but through a lot of reading. Not that many books tell you, put down the book and go outside and look at the moon. You know, that's where a lot of this takes place, but for some reason, we're deferring. Students do this a lot, but I think a lot of us continue to do it. We defer to the experts. The current teacher, the current book, rather than looking within and trusting what's showing up there, even if it means struggling with it for a while until it truly becomes clear, which can take some time. None of these are instant processes. You know, no matter how good any book or teacher is, it's how we put those things into practice later, if we do at all, that make it our own and make it part of our life. This is not like it's some instant fix, which I think people don't quite get when they step onto this path. It's a path. It's going somewhere. It's quite a lengthy trail. And, sometimes if I say things like that, people kind of go, oh. I don't know. I think Tarot is a path. Mm-hmm. I've been studying it for years, and I'm really delighted that the path is still winding all over the place, and there's more to learn. I keep learning more all the time. So the idea that it's all in one class, no, most of these things aren't. Discipline, dedication, where do those come in? Can't teach them. And people that can't bring some of that on their own to back up whatever they're reading will eventually not be around the fire partying. I hope.
Hey, it's interesting we are discussing this today. I had a conversation just last night with someone who is new to this path, isn't quite sure if this is his path and where to go. And he says, well, I'll just read. I got a reading list and I'll just read. And I looked at him, and what I told him is, well, that's a good place to start. You have to, he's a little bit introverted, a little shy, a little afraid of coming to a public ritual. And I think that reading might be a good place to start, but again, this is a mystery religion. You're not going to get it all from a book. It's an experiential. And if you're the type of person that maybe wants to read and then practice a meditation, if you're that kind of person, that might be worthwhile to you. But at some point, you have to leave your house, talk to some other pagans, experience lots of different traditions, rituals. I think just about any person, kid, whatever age group they are, when they come to this path, they might start off with a book. And I don't think that's necessarily bad, because if they're willing to get out of the house and come to a meetup, come to a Living Earth, go to Beltania, come to Cuups, come to Pagan Pride, they'll get a little bit of an experience, and eventually the experiential people, the people that don't want to be dedicated and disciplined will get weeded out, and they won't be here. They won't be at the fireplace. I don't think it's a bad place to start with a book, but I wouldn't say you can get everything from it.
I wanted to jump in and respond to something I keep hearing, and that's weeded out and weeded out. And I don't know. I think the exposure of our way of practice, which is how I view it, not belief but practice, to the overculture has afforded us a magnificent opportunity to bring in every possible aspect of practice and permutation of it. And, one of the things that I always tell my students, and one of the things that I try and live by, is that there's plenty of room at the table. That no weeding out needs to happen, but what I would love to see is for this practice, this life way, to begin operating through every possible life. And just like any prism refracts light out, and we begin seeing the full spectrum of, what happens when party pagans take spirit seriously? Wow, we wind up with these amazing fire dancers and, beautiful hula hoop gals and guys with incredible performance abilities who can grace our events, and they are of tremendous value to me. So, coming back to the spirit of the question, I hear a concern about disciplined application of practice, but I wonder if I can have big enough eyes, because I do it too. I put blinders on too, and I say, I do it even to some of my students, and was, had to get a reminder from one of my teachers. Hey, approach this student just like you had never seen him before every single time, because you're looking at him and you're making these judgments about his performance based on a past, not where he is and meeting him in spirit and saying, grow with me. So I don't know. I question my own eyes, and are they big enough to see the diversity that's out there that can apply this practice?
That's a really good point, Shantat. I think you said something really meaningful there. One thing I would like to add, about the overculture accepting pagans more now than before. We are getting people who maybe are more interested on a very light level, people who just kind of want to find out a little bit more about it. And I think it's really important that we're very inclusive of those people. And I also think that the more people who, not just who are interested in being pagan, but the more people who we have who know about it and who are tolerant of our religion, I think that benefits us tremendously, because being in the closet for any reason whatsoever, whether it's for religious reasons, for sexual orientation, and being in the closet for any reason has harmful side effects. And the more widespread knowledge, understanding, and acceptance that we can get, I think that can only benefit our community, and all traditions and all religions will benefit from that.
I think definitely education is the key. That I have had very interesting experiences in Colorado Springs. That I am the most open pagan that is possibly out there, and I have actually never really been met with anything negative. And it's funny, I go to work, I'm a surgical tech, and my boss asks me regularly, he's like, how are the pagans going today? It was a fun experience to explain last year going to Beltania what Beltane was. That was interesting, having to be like, well, there's no other way to explain the maypole.
Sorry about that, Michelle.
Yeah, there really isn't an easy way to explain that, except just coming out and be like, yeah, it's a phallic symbol that we dance around with ribbons.
And rap.
And we rep it. And to be met with, I work with 19 other people. Every single one of them knows I'm pagan. Every single one of them is accepting. And I think a large part of that is that when they ask questions, I'm willing to answer them. And not just with,
Yes.
well, I'm pagan.
Yes.
And it's funny that, my bumper stickers now just keep adding to my beautiful car. But Happy Naked Pagan Dancing is on my car because of my boss. Because his first impression was that's what I was going to Beltania to do. And he now knows much differently that there's a huge amount. And I think that our oval culture, that as we come out of the broom closet and we explain and educate, that a lot of that kind of all comes together.
I think you're right. I think it's the happy naked pagan dancing that gets people's attention. I mean, who wouldn't? It's just natural. But and educating is great. I think that's exactly what everybody who follows this path, that's part of their path, is to educate. When someone asks you, what are you? Don't hide your ring. Don't hide your pentagram. Tell them. If you're wearing the symbols, you better be willing to explain them. But it also, I don't think, means pagan light, Wicca light. Right. I think that you do what you do because that's what you're called to do, and you have every right to walk up to someone who's doing something fluff bunny and say, okay, what are you doing? What's your purpose? Not
that
necessarily.
might be their purpose, though.
If that's their purpose and they have an answer, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a problem with anybody who has an answer. Mm-hmm. It's when they say, well, I don't know.
I got to say, and oftentimes in the Wiccan community, there is a much mocking of the New Age. But the New Age is not new. And without the New Age, a lot of people who are now consider themselves Wiccan would not be. And so there is a place for these things that bridge, even though they've usurped certain Native American traditions, but I'm not bitter. Much. There is there is a place for this. There absolutely is a place for it, because as things become more common knowledge, it becomes a safer world for
people who are different to live in.
Absolutely.
And as it becomes more common knowledge, people ask questions about that which they never would have asked questions about. And they become a little more informed. And then they can go out and inform other people. And then they can say, you know, they're not like that at all. So
I know this guy who knew this guy.
Panelists, and has everyone had a chance to speak
Maggie
to the
hasn't.
question?
Quality versus quantity. Interesting concept. When I did found the kindred, or my kindred, years and years ago, my sword brother would put out the invites to everywhere. And at the time, he worked at what used to be called Regal Video, which was an adult bookstore on Colorado Boulevard. Mm-hmm. And he thought it was great to see all these odd, goth-looking women to come over that were really just ready to do whatever they wanted to do. And the first 3 or 4 bloats that we held, we had numbers 50, 60 people. And I would sit there and I'd listen to people, you know, raise the horn and hail outside or indoor plumbing or hail beer or hail, you know, copulation or just whatever they wanted to. And something, it was nice to see this great, huge influx of people attending. And about 6 months after that happened, I woke up with one of my infamous headaches and I heard, boy, this isn't a circus. This is your faith. Treat it as such with reverence. So I called him and I said, it stops. What do you mean? No more. I said, we don't need 60 people attending that are there because it's great food and drink. I said, it stops now. Oh, okay. The very next gathering, we had 4 people. Since then, I've worked, like I said earlier, I've worked very hard to achieve this position where the kindred is no longer mine. It has become the kindred because it is a living, breathing entity. We have 20 members now. Our gatherings are back upwards of 40 to 50 people, but they're all there for the purpose of connecting with the divine. It has completely changed. Greyheart has attended a couple of our blows, and he sees this sense of tribe, this sense of community, this sense of family that we have. And I will take that any day over the quantity of people. So my opinion, and again, this is my opinion, just like when I teach my room class, these are my opinions. These are the viewpoints that I have. Hopefully it'll help you wake up or open your eyes and see something differently and use it as a stepping stone to move forward. But don't take what I say as gospel. But I think that there are those that can cause us harm. And again, you know, I don't have to worry about being in a broom closet. I just have to worry about, you know, my label being associated with racist and hate-mongering constantly. And so, you know, I've never been in a closet. I've always worn my hammers out in the open. And most of the customers that I worked with out here for 16 years know me, what I am. When I had to found my own business, it's got a hammer right on the business card. I'm not afraid to say who I am, what I am, and I defy anybody to try to put me in my place. So
That's Thor's job.
that's right.
Well, thank you, everyone, for all of your insights and your presence for this work today. I'd like everyone to take a breath with me. And if anyone from the audience has questions, please come up now to the microphone that's right there. And if you would, try and direct your question either to a particular panelist or to the group as a whole.
Do any of you go on Wikipedia and add to it?
Well, that's a really good question.
I never have. I haven't felt qualified.
And you all are. Wikipedia is on the internet, and you all can educate the world and us all by contributing to that fabulous website.
Hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about it either.
Hadn't even thought of that.
It's,
I use it for searching.
and I don't experience or explore a lot of it. Go ahead, John, you can come on up. But a lot of the stuff on the Norse and the runes and everything, I look at it, and if I really wanted to try to modify all of it, I would need a month at home. But I have made certain changes, and it's amazing at how much wrong information there is. So I may have to start looking at others. But yeah, just for the Norse side of it, it is amazing what's there. But I do make changes whenever every couple of weeks that I can. So.
That's the only issue that I have is that if I take the time to put something up there, and somebody else can change it. That kind of bothers me a little bit. But I can see a community program trying to.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Two quick things. One on the financial situation. Look in the mirror. We're all witches, heathens, pagans, or shamans in this room. Many years ago, I had the same problem. I went to my deity and I looked at my lady and I said, we don't have enough time for each other. We don't have enough money. I went to my deity and said, listen, you called me. Here's the bond between you and me. I will do you work if you give me the time to spend with my wife and the financial situation to do it. I've never had a problem since then. If you're in a vow of poverty, it's because that's what you chose. We create our own reality. The other thing is about the congregation versus priest or priestesses. We're into a community now where I think Joy said about people wanting to come and not really wanting to learn. So we have a congregational out here that people want to come to the rituals, but they really don't want to spend the time and energy to learn what do we do. Maybe that's a question that the panel ought to be addressing.
Well, what is the precise question?
Should we allow congregationalism within the pagan community?
Should we allow it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Or should we require everybody to be a priest or priestess? Right. Yeah.
I think Ardentane actually has a setup like that in their work in New Mexico, where there's more of an inner circle. People are far more involved, and other ones that attend things. But I believe they attend as participants. They're not just
with public ritual, most everybody that attends are participants.
Right.
You have a few people that's the core group that's putting on the ritual, but the rest would be considered congregational.
Right. And I think you're hitting on something there, John. And I think we kind of talked about this a little bit at our last panel discussion, that we are developing this laity as opposed to everyone being clergy. I think it's a great thing to have a congregational model because I think because of our numbers, there's so many people who are interested. And I really hope that gets developed more and more. And I kind of see my role as being, getting this congregational model going simply to address the needs of people that are wanting that to happen.
Explain congregational.
Congregation in the sense of people who are either new and haven't learned a whole lot, who might want to get to that point where they would eventually want to be a priestess or priest themselves, or people who simply want to come and have someone and attend a ritual. Okay. People who aren't ready yet, or who don't want to get to that point of really getting into the deep study, doing their year in a day, and really doing that practice. I see my role as kind of doing more of the congregational kinds of things, so that if and when people are ready to take that next step, I can direct them to the people who can get them that intense personal study and work and help them on their path. But I don't see myself as someone who is going to be teaching those classes or taking on students and initiating people. That's not my role. I see myself as more of that first interaction with the public.
You're the organizer.
Mm-hmm. I'm sort of, that's kind of where I see myself.
I think
you might talk to some of the cuups folks. They operate very much on a congregational model. They're providing services. They're providing a space. They're providing an environment where newcomers can come and learn without being necessarily committed to a path.
That's the role of connector that
Right.
Joy and we in cuups try to provide. We can provide a connection to the deeper teaching and the teachers, and act as a vector for that.
Right, because I had someone, he asked me yesterday if I would take them on as a student because they really wanted to learn more, and I'm like, number one, I don't have the time for that, and I can tell you who you can go to, but I'm not that person. I host the rituals, and people can get involved and participate, but I'm not there to provide a coven experience for people.
I think one of my questions in the terminology of congregation is that it denotes to me pretty much a spectator.
Right.
And
Yeah, I don't like that either.
And I really, and I have an issue with that just in the fact of what we do, by the very nature of what we do, it is anything but that. And
agree.
so I would hate to see, and it's just as me, this is just me, I would hate to see a movement turn what is very much an experiential process into a spectator process.
Oh, I'm absolutely right there with you on that. I do not. I am very much into. It is all rituals are very participatory from my perspective.
But there are some people, and this is part of what I'll say is disagrees on that is that I've invited people to come to our bloats, and they're kind of, well, I'm not really. And I said, you know what? Even if you want to attend and sit outside the circle to watch, so you get a feel of what's happening first before you commit to wanting to be in the circle. So some people just need that assurance that, granted, we're not a very spectator-oriented thing, but there are those people that, until they're ready to commit to doing something, because it can be a scary situation for someone that's come out of a very or like Southern Baptist or Catholic or Protestant or something, and going to say, well, I know that this isn't working for me, and I want to experience what else is out there, but I'm not sure about jumping right in with both feet. So I always offer that approach to anybody that has an interest in us, that you can always attend our bloat. If you're not comfortable standing in the circle, then you can sit on the outside, kind of watch. You can participate in this aspect or that aspect, but kind of look and see what happens or what we do, and let you know whether you're comfortable coming into that or not. I don't like, I think that helps some people. And then they may say, you know what, it was beautiful, but it's not for me. And I say, well, I know Greyheart, or I know this person, or I know that person, I know this person, and these are the paths that they do. Here's some contact information for them. Give them a call and see what they can do. But I always leave that option open for whomever attends one of our gatherings to be a spectator, because I don't want them to feel uncomfortable in a circle.
And if I may be very clear on this, when I say a congregational model of paganism, I am not saying going to a preacher and then an audience who is all receptive. I am absolutely against having the sheep and shepherd kind of notion, completely. But what I am saying is that the congregational model to me means that you have the organizers who are doing most of the work, and then the congregation, the people who kind of show up as the congregation. I'm using that term to mean the outer circle, right? The people who don't have to do all the work, people who don't have to be committing to 2 hours a day of doing this, and the kind of the people who just show up, but to help them have that participatory experience, and definitely not being there as a preacher, but more as a consultant and guide and helper of creating an experience.
It's interesting that in Colorado Springs, that's actually what my group was set up to be, to get newcomers and people that are solitary that just want to come and actually do a group ritual. And we've seen it work very, very well. That there are definitely people that just walk in the door and are just like, I have no idea, I've never been in a circle, this is really day one. And it's a good experience to be able to show them, okay, this is circle. This is what we do. This is a ritual. This is just whoever's running it, their take on what they want. And we usually keep our rituals fairly simple just because we usually have the majority of people are new.
Yes.
And I think it's an amazing thing, but I think that it would be great to kind of almost have like the step of ladders, to be able to have groups out there like Joy's and mine that get people in the door to be able to be like, okay, you know what? I think this is my path and I want to learn more, and then to provide them avenues with that.
Right. Okay. Real quickly.
Let's try and wrap this question up so that our next person can
real
come
quickly,
up.
It's been my experience that sheep get eaten, and I try and have an open circle on the Sabbaths where anybody's invited. They don't have to necessarily be in the circle. If they're not comfortable in the circle, they can watch. Not a big deal. And the other half of that equation of when the student's ready, the teacher appears, is that when the teacher's ready, the student appears.
This leads in so smoothly to what I'm thinking. One of the things that some people are not wild about open ritual for is that a lot of people have the feeling like, okay, we're going to do this and stand here and walk there and say these words and pour this and do that. And we're saying the words and doing the movements to give this information to the newer people who are there initially as spectators because they don't know what this is, and that's why they're here. It's the point of the open ritual is for people to come and go, what is this? And all that. And for some of us, when you have your ritual with your group of, 7 or 12 or 15 or 22 people that you work with all the time, and you do the same, you do the same things, and you work with each other, and you know what you're doing, and you're comfortable with each other, and you can really get some juice moving. And then you go and do your open ritual, and you walk here and stand there and say this and pour that. And I think it would really behoove us to look into what are ways that we can get more juice into our open rituals. My big thought on that is more voice and movement. That's just my thought.
Less performance anxiety and more really, truly.
Yeah, come to Hearthstone on Friday and be a part of it. We've got something really cool going on.
Because when you have a lot of people that you're doing this process for, your mind goes to the place of where are they, as opposed to the place of this is what we're doing.
Yeah, to me it's actually stage manager and cast.
See,
is how I see it,
and that is the part. That's where the juice gets lost.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
See, to me it's not. I don't think that's necessary. I don't know. I mean, well, here's the thing: is maybe that is where the juice gets lost. Maybe it's not. What can we do to figure out if that's what it is, and how can we figure out how to get, because we're never going to have an open ritual with 47 people, 35 of whom have never done this before, and get a big juicy ritual like you get at home with your group.
Of course.
But how can we get more?
Because there's an old saying about
it's more likely to happen. The surprise factor.
Every person you have in a
if
group.
I can ask everyone to take a deep breath and let's all try and stay focused so that this doesn't simply become an open forum of lots of people yelling across and over each other. If we can keep a modicum of respect for the person who is speaking and allow them to finish their truth before we move on, that would really facilitate this section. I would like to reiterate your question in perhaps a way that I can understand it, and then open it again for the panel. And that is that after a certain amount of observation of how we practice a religion, the process of enculturation for those outside is not well facilitated in most open circles. And I think your question is, how can we as leaders address that problem? Would you say that that's an accurate paraphrase?
I don't know if it's even acculturation per se. It's just that I think that for a lot of people, for a lot of us with more experience, when you're going to an open ritual, there's just not as much energy, there's not as much beer, there's not as much juice going. And that's part of what we do ritual for, is getting connected to the larger energy. And I'm wondering what ways we can look at and find to get energy moving, even when we have larger groups of people and who are not as familiar with the process.
Okay, and what was your name?
Can I speak to that?
That's Jade.
Jade, that's right. And I would like to speak to it first, and then I'll open it up to the panel. I would still beg to differ. I think it is an enculturation process. I think a lot of what we wind up doing in our smaller groups is exactly that. We enculturate each other. We come to egregore, a common understanding of not only the symbols that we manipulate, but the physical rituals that we undergo to get to a place of juiciness, being connected to larger and larger energies, first to each other, then to perhaps the moon, then to perhaps our connection to something like, our relationship to money, or whatever our ritual is intended for us to begin to internally process. An outsider, I think, lacks that sense of shared reality because they are not enculturated. They don't, I can just simply say a prayer here and can we breathe together, and all of us in this room will stop, will center, will align, will perform all of these actions we've already learned in our culture just by saying, can we all breathe for a moment?
And I see what you're talking about. I've seen it for a long time. I think that's part of that whole quality over quantity thing that I've been about. I think it's been kind of an idea I've had that part of the reason that we don't have the energy that we used to in the open rituals, the ones that I remember when I first came to this path. Well, I think a lot of it is because when I first came to this path, I was one of a few who didn't know everybody. Everybody else who was there already knew everybody. They were comfortable with each other in circle. And as more and more people came into that circle that nobody knew, more and more people had a much harder time sharing energy with people that they didn't know. If I know everybody in the circle, I know whether I want to share that energy with both coming to me from them as well as putting out towards them. And with a bunch of strangers, I'm not too sure whether that's really what I want to do. And I think that's part of the reason why we don't see as much energy, if any energy, in these open rituals, is that people don't know each other like they used to in the open rituals. They're a bunch of strangers. And so as people start to go to these open rituals more and more, they get known, they get acculturated, and they start to become a part of that group. They're no longer spectators, they become participants. Mm-hmm. And I think that whether it is a matter of sifting out the attendants who were just spectators and saying, okay, we would love to have you here and watch us, but we'd like to have a ritual where we're doing a little bit of magic, and we want you to be aware of what's involved before you participate.
Sometimes it's like a grounding, like a pre-grounding or an intense setting, but it's bringing that in. And I know there's enough people here that have worked solitary and worked in groups with people that they don't know. Every time you bring a person in, they have their own energy. And that energy influences the greater energy. And so by doing that acculturation, by allowing people, watch any open ritual that Sarah Rain does, and you'll know what I'm talking about. There is no separateness within those rituals, and it's really an art to do large open rituals. It's very, very difficult, and my hat goes off to people who are willing to do very large open rituals, because there's a lot of work and a lot of energy that goes into that. But a big piece of that is that you have so many people with their own thing going on in their head that are going to show up there in that space. And the first thing that needs to happen is that thing needs to leave their head. They need to get in alignment with every other person that's in that space.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. And in the process of doing that, then at that point, then you can pull that energy in, and everybody's on the same page.
May I add to that? To do that, to bring people together, a diverse group of people who may or may not know each other, when you have a large group of people, especially at an open ritual, it is the job of the priests or priestesses who are running that to bring everyone together, to make everyone feel welcome, and to make that connection to spirit happen. To say, well, we just can't have this connection to spirit because it's an open ritual, I think that's a cop-out.
I agree.
And it's a lack of training. It's totally a cop-out. So, and I've had rituals that I've done where I haven't really felt that full connection to spirit. So you know what I did? I took some classes, and I got more training, and I really thought about it, and I worked with my steering committee, and it's something that when I've put extra energy into it and made sure that I went into circle, setting the template for what that energy was going to be like, the ritual can be amazing. And my most intense and amazing ritual experiences have been with at open and public circles that I've done with Living Earth. And I wouldn't continue to do Living Earth rituals if I weren't getting fed that way with that awesome energy. And it can happen, and it does. with the right training, with the right people coming in with that personal responsibility as a
The right
stakeholder.
mindset.
The right mindset.
I think the training is the most important key. I am fairly new to paganism. I've only been following this path for about 5 or 6 years. And about 2 years into it, I somehow found myself running a meetup group, which I still don't know how I managed to do that. That I was running, I chose by default, had to run a ritual that I didn't have the training to really do. And over the last couple of years, I have found that with more training and more experience that I get, the more connected I can get with the community. That the more that I learn how to open myself up to the energies, to figure out, okay, how do we get them to not just be participants on the sidelines? That now, we try to incorporate music. We try to have something for everybody to actually do during the ritual and to take home. The first ritual that I actually had stars that had words and symbols on them to everybody. And when I handed them out, everybody wanted to give them back to me. They didn't understand that, no, this is your message to take home with you. It was very confusing, but now, a year later, it's something that has grown with us and now kind of helps bridge that gap, that we're coming together and the energy is starting to flow better. I think it's an evolution of our group that we're still really, really young, so it's definitely not there. It's definitely different when, I go to other people's groups that have been around. I go to Dragonfest or Beltania and I'm just blown away, or just even with my coven, that I think as we get the training, we can implement it, and I think it would be amazing if we can figure out how to implement it faster and better.
So much of this comes back to, are we creating a space that is open to spirit coming in? Because when it turns into scripts and kind of hitting your mark concerns, that's not really leaving room for spirit. Are we creating a space for spirit to come in, and are we creating a space in which everyone present there feels comfortable with that, as opposed to, wow, I don't know any of these people and I am still nervous? Does it feel safe for people to be psychically open to some degree in a circle? Training is great. More practice doing it is great. These are things that I think we learn by doing, but we don't make it happen. We find ways to help allow it happen, but that's what I'd love to see more and more focus on. One of the comments that came up was that idea of maybe things being analyzed of what didn't work. And over the years, when I would give students an assignment of attending a lot of open rituals, and I was giving them addresses and times and the whole doodah, and telling them, team up with each other so you don't have to feel like you're alone, and it won't be so scary, people were incredibly resistant to saying which parts didn't work for them, which parts did, and looking at it from outside, not in the middle of the ceremonies, but looking back on it later and kind of going, boy, that didn't feel right. Now, if we don't even come away with the sense of empowerment to say, that didn't feel right to me, what on earth are we sowing here in the community with ourselves, with students, with friends?
Exactly.
Not to be standing there analyzing it while it's taking place, ideally, although we've probably each been to one of those rituals. But that idea that somehow this is so sacred, you can't question it later and say, how can we do this better? Who does that serve?
I think we have another question.
Yeah.
Okay, not exactly sure how to actually phrase this very well, but back to the participant versus audience question. At what point do you cross that line between just being an audience member and being a participant? Like you go to some rituals and like you expect to get something out of it, and really do try as much as you can to get something out of it, and nothing really comes to you. And it's like, did I really just waste my time? Or in other times, you really don't know what just happened. You're sure something happened, but you don't know what it is. So I guess the question is, at what point do you really cross that line of?
Well, I think if you're at a ritual and something happens and you're not sure what happened, then it's your obligation as a person to approach that priest or priestess and say, this has happened to me, and I don't understand it. Can you give me a little insight on maybe what happened to me? Because, if you attend one of our gatherings and you leave and you heard this voice in your head and this image of this person, with a big floppy hat and a cloak and, had a couple of wolves next to him and stuff, and he was telling you, you know what, you need to open your mind and you need to pay attention to this and learn from this. And you're like, I've never seen that person before in my life. I don't know what happened. And you go off and they go, well, maybe it was just kind of like a hallucination or something. Maybe it was my own fears manifesting or something like that. Then you are keeping yourself an audience member. But if you take that step and go forward and say, I loved your ritual last night. I was kind of confused. This is what happened. Then you're becoming an active participant, because then you've got this group of people that should, by all rights, explain to you what happened or give you insight and then help you formulate, what maybe happened, and then let you have the tools to go forward and say, okay, now that I know that this is who was talking to me, and they've given me some information to further my study on that, then I can go and help develop that and learn what happened to you. But, I'm right there with you. I've gone to Wicked open circles, and I stand around and I see something, and they call, the element of fire to watch a corner or something. And I look when this fire elemental shows up, and I'm going, wow, now that's damn impressive. And yet the person that just did it hasn't got a clue what they've just done. They're walking around, and I'd like to really thank Fire for coming today, and I hope you keep everybody safe. And then they turn around and walk away, and I'm watching this thing going, okay, I'm here. What did you want? Mm-hmm. Where did you go? Mm-hmm. And they don't even understand. And I think they're an audience member and not a participant, because they don't understand that connection. So, yeah, and I had to talk to the priest of that coven and say, wow, what was going on there?
Yeah.
So,
or the other way around, where they call something and they're just they're going through the motions and nothing happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But where do you become a member? Where do you stop being an audience? When something happens. When you feel something in that ritual, you have stopped being a spectator and you've become a participant. And as Magni said, now it's time to step up and say, okay, something happened. This ritual moved me. I may not know why or how. Talk to the priest or priestess or both and say, this ritual moved me and I'd like to learn more about it.
What I would say is that whether you choose to be a participant or an audience member, it really comes down to your personal decision. I had a time when I was first starting off on my path where I would approach rituals with a very critical eye. Oh, I can't believe they did this. Oh, that's so stupid. Oh, I just wouldn't do it that way. That's not how I would do it. And I think as I've grown and matured in my path and gotten older, I would have to say that it's been a really, really, really long time since I've been to a ritual where I haven't gotten anything out of it, because I have made the choice over the years to say, I'm going to come in and I'm going to bring myself fully there and I'm going to be fully present. And regardless what happens, and I've been to rituals where things have just completely fallen apart. I've even led rituals where things have completely fallen apart. But you know what? I've gotten something out of it because I've made that decision that I am here to commune with Spirit, and whatever happens, happens. And I'm going to find something meaningfully in it, even if it's not there from the ritual presenters. I'm going to just enjoy being in sacred space, and I'm going to make some meaning out of it, regardless of what other people are doing. That doesn't affect my space internally.
It goes back to you're going to get out of it what you put into it, in anything.
Mm-hmm. And I think I would phrase that as, I get a really different result myself if I go to something saying I want to see what happens, instead of something more like I want to be part of what happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd love to plus value what Rena had to say. I think the core of spiritual practice is to build presence. Any spiritual practice, whether we're present with this moment and this connection and this conversation that's going on, whether we're present with our own pain and coping with that, or our own joy and coping with that, whether we're present with someone else's need and trying to understand compassion in a deeper way, that all of it boils down at some point to true presence. And, one of the prayers that I say every day is I would know myself in all my parts. And I would know myself in all my parts every minute of every day that I would ask to be fully possessed by myself at all times. So coming to ritual for me is an affirmation of a plan for the rest of my life anyway. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Something that I heard in the discussion following each of the 4 questions that were prepared was a questioning of, where is my spiritual authority? Where does it come from? How do I name it, claim it, proclaim it? What do I do with it? And I'm asking in this way because it's a part of my theological training. I've been working as a chaplain for the last 6 years as a Buddhist and a pagan. And when you want to talk about role of clergy, there are many different types of clergy. Some are teachers, some are facilitators of spiritual exploration, some are ministers. Each person has a different way of relating to that question. Where does my spiritual authority come from? So that's my question for this panel as we think about where are we going as a community? How do we articulate a response to that question? And then I think we will begin to get a different set of answers and perhaps a little bit less confusion as we differentiate roles for clergy.
That is not an all-inclusive. I think sometimes we do get wrapped up in the terminology of clergy means that not only do I have to provide the space, I also have to do all the teaching, I have to do all the ministering, plus take care of everybody. I think you brought up a very good point, that it can actually be differentiated out to different people, that we all have amazing gifts and skills, and that we should be able to put ourselves in the positions where we are best suited. And I think that is actually a very important key point.
My hypothesis is that the response to that question drives how we manifest and lends clarity to the roles that we take on.
What's your name?
That's why I'm a chaplain and not a minister.
What's your name?
My name is Dave.
Dave, thank you, Dave. I want to jump in and respond too, and then I want to open this up to the panel and have the panel chat on it too. It's funny. I'm teaching a class on what I call psychic anatomy, which is nothing more than kind of the structure of the subtle bodies that attach to your physical body and their functions and how to communicate with them and get them communicating. And the question that I asked all of my students last week to ponder during the week and journal is, what is your spiritual authority? And I think it's very funny that without that sentence ever being uttered today, that sentence got uttered today in the question of the panel, and now it's my turn to ask the question because, you can't do this crap without having to do this crap yourself. And it's fascinating, part of the flower prayer that I mentioned earlier, the entire prayer, it's actually from Huna, though it comes through Victor Anderson, is who is this flower above me and what is the work of this God? I would know myself in all my parts. And the second part of that is exactly your question. What is the work of this God? Who is my spiritual authority? What is my spiritual authority? What is it that wants to come through me in this life experience in the world to you or to this place or to my relationships around me? And I think it's I want to mirror what you had to say, that there is room for all of those, and I don't need to be all of them. So that was a lovely insight, thank you. And that's my personal experience on it. My panel?
I think that if you ask each and every one of us sitting on the panel, including the ones that were here last time but aren't tonight, we all provide a separate service. What I do is not the same thing as what the other Joy does. it's not the same thing as what Kat does. We all may say we're clergy or leaders or whatever term you want to use, but we all provide a different service to our membership, for lack of a better word. And it just kind of comes down to what I'm good at might not be what Magni's good at, but we still have gifts to offer. And I think all of us on the panel have different gifts that we're sharing.
You know, I think of the question of who is my spiritual authority, or what gives me my spiritual authority. As a pagan, I would have to say I am my own spiritual authority. In other more mainstream religions, your authority as a clergy person or whatever, it comes from whoever ordained you, or, you know, because you get to wear the collar, or some church give you a piece of paper and you went through a certain course of study. Maybe because someone else designates you as someone with a certain body of knowledge or in a certain role. I don't know. I think it's more clear-cut in other religions. I know in my heart of hearts that I am my own spiritual authority, and I don't need to answer to anyone else in this room about what is right for me spiritually. However, my authority, in quotes, as a leader of a group, that comes from the people who I serve and work with, and it comes from Goddess and God. So I don't know if maybe I'm just not fully understanding your question or the terminology, but I think we have earned authority based on the work that we do, and that comes from those who are around us, and you know, from our spiritual guides, from the people who we care about, from our community. But that spiritual authority that is that deep ingrained knowledge of my connection to Goddess. That is something that comes from within. So, yeah.
I think that's a very true statement. That I think that in the community, that we earn by our actions and our doings. And then our community sits there and says, well, you are, because you're already doing it. And they give us that name and that authority. I think on a personal level, it's a little bit harder, especially coming from an extremely mainstream Catholicism, where there's such a certain way that you become ordained, that it's very hard for me to just sit there and say, I have my own spiritual authority. But I'm learning that I kind of have to, because the Goddess keeps giving me cosmic 2x4s. That has led me that, you know, obviously to be able to provide for this community and to be able to help, that I have to believe it within myself first. And until that happens, I can't be as good to the community and offer all that's needed until then. And so I think that we all have to find it within ourselves first. And as pagans, the only person it can come from is you.
You know, I think you bring up a very valid point. Most of us, I think, came from a religion where the authority came through the church. The preacher, pastor, father, whatever, was given the authority through the church, I mean, ultimately from God, but through the church. And
thou shalt
yeah,
not.
Yeah. Now, back in the old days, when I used to walk 20 miles to school both directions in 3 foot of snow, barefoot, uphill both directions.
Uphill both ways.
Yes. It was passed down not necessarily from student to teacher, but there was that, you know, it was the teacher recognized the student had learned a certain amount and had said, okay, you have passed this point in the learning, you are now a priest or priestess. It wasn't the priest or priestess or high priest or priestess saying that you know, conferring the authority so much as recognizing the authority. Okay?
That's the degrees.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We no longer really have a lot of that anymore. It still happens here and there, but not as much as it used to. I mean, that used to be the only way you got your degree or your authority was that your teacher, your high priest or priestess said, you've gone through your year and a day or however long it took you, You've learned the lessons that are required in order for you to effectively do this part of the ritual. So now this is where you are. Again, they're not conferring that authority, they're simply recognizing. And where does the spiritual authority come from? It comes from deity.
You're articulating two different things. Mm-hmm. The authority that you claim and the authorities that you learned from.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Are they different? What stops you, any of you?
Let me answer that.
Go ahead and answer that.
Okay, I'm just chapped. I just have to answer that. We are all divine beings. We have purpose when we come into this world. We have a connection to spirit, every person in this room. That's another reason why sometimes you don't need to have something conferred upon you, because you already have it. It's an embodiment within yourself. How that manifests in our life journey, it unfolds in front of us, and people are drawn to us. We're drawn to people that help flesh out our purpose in this life, where our gifts are better used. So, yeah, it is two things. They're happening at the same time. But essentially, it absolutely is that which is our purpose at our core level of who we are, manifest in this tangible reality we call life.
Speakers, if we can, I don't know if everyone has had a chance to speak on this subject. If you've not, then please chime in. This will be our last question, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
I'm a guy that knows some stuff. That's all I am. You know, and I tell that to my kinfolk every time we get together. I'm just a guy that knows some stuff. And the people that give me authority are the people that I look at when I stand in circle, the people that I see every day when, you know, I go and have dinner with them, or I'm helping them with something else, or they're coming over and we're learning something else. Those are the people that give me any authority that I have. Other than that, I'm just a guy that knows some stuff, man. That's all there is to it. You know, just because I talk to the gods every day, and like somebody said earlier, you know, there's a fine line between being here and being that guy in the padded cell. I don't let the voices break me, and I understand that I'm not crazy because they talk to me. But, you know, I was asked to fill a need in the heathen community many years ago, and so I put my foot upon that path. And when I had the Allshergodi from Iceland flown to Vinland, which has never been done in the history of the Norse ever, and I made that happen. And talking to this man that had been in charge in Iceland on that seat of power for 20, 30 years, and having him tell me afterwards, he said, you know, over in Iceland, we kind of look at you people here in America as a big joke. He said, because you know what? You all don't know what it's really like to live in the environments of your ancestors. And when he looked at me, he says, but you know what? You're different. And he said, when I go back home and I tell people about you, he said, know that it will be with respect. And that meant a lot. And that was one of the things that made me decide to ask him if he felt I was ready to take the oath of the Gothar and continue that work forward. And so I did. But outside of that, like I said, just a guy that knows some things. So.
I think I'd speak in some kind of similar ways. I know some stuff. I also have a pretty good sense of what I don't know. If someone is coming to me to do shamanic healing or do training in those things I teach, I'm the authority at that time for them. That's why they're there, I presume. Reasonable assumption. But that's not the end of that. I mean, if I'm doing healing work with somebody, I do that from within a place of spirit, that if I can't listen to them clearly and understand what they want me to do, voice of spirit, and I'm jumping in with my own busy head going, oh, that doesn't make sense, I better do it different. You know, my job there is not to be the editor. I'm just there as the extension cord, the jumper cables. So egoically, if I can't step out of the way at that point and just hear what I need to hear. And you don't start doing that because you took a workshop for one weekend and decided to go out and start healing people. That came after years of listening to those voices within the shamanic journey on my own behalf and finding out that if I paid attention and heard them clearly in all their metaphoric glory and could follow some of that, I would get better results in my own life. If I was second-guessing and trying to reanalyze it, which I'm pretty prone to doing, not there. This wasn't open to wild interpretation on my part of things that seemed to make better sense. So for me, a lot of it just keeps coming back to at what point do I consistently get out of my own way and hear something that's coming from a more direct, more connected place that's outside of the requirements of physical form and reality that we live in. Where do we hook into that more divine place? Because we all have that capacity. But knowing we can do it and actually doing it are different things. So.
Has everyone had a chance to speak to this?
Okay, I want to say again thank you to everyone for holding space and presence and for coming and learning and being open. And if we would breathe again with each other, I would pray, Holy Mother, in whom we live, move, and have our being. From you all things emerge, and unto you all things return. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Okay, so some final stuff.
Thank you, Shenkat, for hosting us.
Thank you.
And thanks to JUC and Cuups.
So, just to finalize, if you want biographical information, I need your email address. If you know people who you would like to see as speakers or you yourself would like to be a speaker, then please also approach me. And I think, is there anything else that GOC Cuups needs to mention?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's meringue cookies up here that I brought that you can leave my house.
You did say you got a lot.